Welcome to today's 2020 Awards podcast. I'm very excited about today's guest. In 1971, he parachuted from a plane over the Pacific Northwest with a suitcase full of $200,000 in ransom money. He has been on the top of the FBI's most wanted list ever since, eluding law officials for over 4 decades. Please welcome to the show one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, until now, Mr. D.B. Cooper.
Thanks. That's not me, though.
So you're not wanted by the FBI?
No, I'm B.P. Cooper. So it's close.
All right. So what is it you do?
I produce feature films and commercials.
Was there a movie that you want to talk about now that you're here?
Shallow Grave.
Wonder how he did it.
Did what?
Well, killed himself. Presume that's what's happened. What do you think?
Alex?
What? What's wrong?
What are you doing?
I'm just looking.
Don't.
Don't look.
No.
Why not? What's wrong, Juliet? Aren't you curious? Don't you wonder what he died from?
No. The guy's dead. What more do you need?
It's not every day I find a story in my own flat.
It's not a story, Alex. It's a corpse.
So before we dig into Shallow Grave, let's unearth B.B. Cooper and his feature film Time Lapse, which he co-wrote and produced. Time Lapse screens at the Seattle International Film Festival Saturday, May 31st at 8:30 p.m. and the following day, Sunday, June 1st at 11:30 a.m. here at the Uptown Cinema. Cooper was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. Over the course of an afternoon in March of 2000, he made repeated attempts to order pizza online over a 56K dial-up. His foolish actions broke the internet, burst the dot-com bubble, and caused the stock market to crash. Universally despised for setting off a chain reaction of global despair, he fled to Los Angeles and found anonymity in the ultra-low-profile entertainment industry. He's since produced a bunch of things you may or may not have seen, but mostly enjoys the writing process. So, really, you didn't steal money from a plane, but you destroyed the internet and the American economy.
I didn't think you were actually going to read that. I thought that was the print.
Well, this is voice print, so...
Yeah, I'll take the money any way I can get it, as long as it's stolen. Yeah.
All right, well, you know, that is a producer's job, right?
Well, I don't know about that.
So, well, anyway, welcome, Coop, and tell us about Time Lapse.
Time Lapse is this hot little thriller with a sci-fi element. It's about 3 roommates who discover this mysterious machine that takes pictures 24 hours into the future, and they decide to use the machine's power to better their own world, and bad things start happening, of course, once you try and make your life better. So... That's what happens there.
Really? When you try to make your life better, bad things happen?
It does. In the movies. Okay. Otherwise, it would be a boring movie.
All right. Yeah. God, no, that explains my life then. I've been trying to be better, and yeah, it's bad. So where'd you come up with this idea?
Bradley and I were working on a couple other things, and they were just too expensive, and we were tired of waiting to figure out how to raise millions and millions of dollars. So he said, we have to do something small, and something that we can control in a small environment. Something. There's a lot of independent films, I guess, that we could reference, but primer as far as the sci-fi element goes, and something that's more like singular location, which I guess Shallow Grave would be a good example of that. It's mostly done in an apartment.
Right.
And the idea of the actual camera came from another movie called Timeline with Paul Walker from a long time ago.
Okay.
And if you like time travel movies, you'll probably like it. If you're a movie snob, you probably won't. I like the movie. But in the movie... They have to find out where Paul Walker's scientist father went, and they can't figure it out. He built a time machine and went into it. So they decide to send an actual camera, just a plain old digital camera, into the machine, and they point it up to the sky to take picture of the constellations. And by that, they can figure out where on planet Earth he is, and also when, since stars, they change. And I thought that's pretty clever.
That's very clever.
What if the camera itself was actually a time machine, And that's all I said to Bradley on like a Friday. He came into the office on a Monday with a whole list of how we could make that an actual movie, one location,
right,
rear window style, where it's one apartment looking into another,
right.
And I said no, let's work on our other projects. But he said, let's just note card this for 2 days, and if we're stuck after like 2 days, fine, we'll go back to what we were working on. But if we get momentum, let's just stay on it. And 2 days turned into 2 weeks, and by the end of the month, we had a script.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Very cool. I love when stuff like that happens, where it's like, oh, I got a great idea.
Yeah, it was just one of it made itself.
Yeah,
it really did.
Did it write itself? No.
It wrote itself.
No, I just that expression kills me every time I hear it. It's like, it writes itself. I had come up with an idea every week that writes itself, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah,
what was I thinking?
It truly doesn't.
Yeah,
but if it turns out poorly, you can say it wrote itself, because then you can deny any responsibility.
Take yourself out of the equation, right? Yeah. What do you hope audiences take away from time lapse?
I hope they just enjoy it. It's and I hope they're talking about it over either lunch or dinner or whatever, where or whenever they see it, that they're talking about it with whoever they came with. I feel like it has at least that element of good confusion to it, or thought-provoking, rather, where you want to sort of debate how it all worked and how it happened, and that sort of thing. That's what I like doing with movies. So
I love time travel films. So is this sort of a genre? I mean, not that it's really a genre, but
it's definitely genre. It's certainly way more thriller than it is sci-fi. It has a sci-fi element, and it's, I guess, not spoiling anything, and more accurate and fair to just disclose that there's not actual any time travel in the film. So no one physically goes through time.
Yeah.
Which was actually a good thing for us, because unless you're Primer or Time Crimes, that's a really hard thing to pull off low budget. Well, you'd have to come up with a whole new cool thing, and I feel like Time Crimes already did. Every 10 years someone's going to do it, and Time Crimes already did it. 10 years, after Primer, so we can't do it for 8 more years. So so we had to do something different. So
you're looking 8 years into the future.
You're not allowed to do 2 good things at once. So they can't exist in the universe at the same time. It'll explode.
So I was going to ask, I remember when I made my student film, I had first produced the Friends movie, and it was, all sorts of crazy logistics, and it was, backbreaking. And I remember thinking, like, oh, when I direct my movie, it's going to be one guy silently sitting in a room by himself doing nothing for 10 minutes. And it's just a way to kind of like keep the production from getting overwhelming. So I've always been curious, this idea of having a small location or finite locations. Did it help you as a production, or was it just as big a pain in the butt as any other production?
No, certainly helped. It has its advantages, and I think the advantages certainly outweigh the disadvantages. I guess the advantages being the obvious. You can get more done in a day by not picking everything up, packing it away, and doing a location move. That just kills. Anytime you're not shooting, it just feels like such a waste of resources and talent. Because you have all of these crew members and all of this awesome, expensive, brand new equipment, and it's all packed up in a truck or in their cars going somewhere.
Yeah, we're driving road trip.
It's just awful.
Yeah.
So being able to extract the most amount of shooting possible throughout the day, every day, and just come back to the same place right where you left off is awesome.
Yeah.
That's just one obvious advantage, and then one big disadvantage, and it might seem like a trivial thing, but I disagree. By the end of the first week, you're in these tight, small, confined corridors. I guess if we were at the same location, we were shooting in some massive warehouse or a big soundstage, that's one thing. But we were on a practical location, bungalows built in the 1920s. They are not big, and we even remodeled some and tried to combine our main shooting apartment. We knocked down the wall between two, so there was more room. Not just for production, but for camera.
Right.
And it's still way too small, and people are crawling all over each other, and it's hot, and it just makes for a very frustrating working environment on top of filmmaking, which is frustrating to begin with.
Yeah.
So that wears thin after a while, but it definitely is just something that's where you just suck it up and say, look, like you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's better than a day job.
Right. That's true. Well, speaking of confined environments, let's talk about Shallow Grave. Shallow Grave was the 1994 directorial debut of Danny Boyle. It's a caper film that centers around three roommates played by Ewan McGregor, Christopher Eccleston, and Kerry Fox, who discover a suitcase full of cash under their new roommate's bed after they find he has overdosed on, I believe it's heroin, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The film received quite a few accolades overseas, but was relatively unknown film here in the States, at least until it hit video. But what is it about this film that excites you?
Yeah. It's interesting. I discovered it, of course, on video, like most Americans, I think, did, because it didn't have a very successful theatrical run out here. It had a theatrical run, but it didn't do well.
Right.
It did really well in other countries, and it bankrolled Trainspotting, and it's interesting because the director, obviously Danny Boyle, and also the producer Andrew Macdonald, and the writer, John Hodge, it was all their first film, their very first movie, right? And they all went on to do Trainspotting. It was their very next film, which in 2 years, someone else can come in and talk about that movie, which deserves its own whole segment. But I remember watching, I was a teenager, I was in high school, and you'd go to Blockbuster to watch your movies. You couldn't just get them right when you wanted them like you can today.
Yeah.
And, I would spend an hour, 2 hours walking around with, 20 VHSs or DVDs, and then narrowing it down to the 2 or 3 I'd be allowed to to watch over the weekend. And I remember watching that one and just being blown away by it just felt cool. It just felt so cool. And it was, I'm going to say, quote unquote, a foreign film, even though it's, shot in Scotland.
Right. That brogue can be pretty tough to get through sometimes.
Yeah. But I think that started, you watch a movie that you can tell wasn't made by Americans, and obviously doesn't star any Americans, and it's not through the Hollywood system. And until then, the independent films I had probably seen, like probably anyone else my age at the time, was Clerks and Slackers and a lot of these, American filmmakers that were doing indie films. And this one felt just totally new and refreshing.
Yeah.
And violent, but I guess even for then, it's like, Pulp Fiction came out in 94 too, right?
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh my God, it's so violent. Like when Reservoir Dogs came out a couple years before that, it's so violent. And today it's like, those movies aren't violent at all.
Yeah.
Like they're nothing. But at the time, they were kind of game changers. And I feel like this one, to a degree, was certainly for British cinema at the time. They had a lot of hoity-toity movies. And
there was a lot of Merchant Ivory.
Oh, yeah. And those are good films. But... and I'm gonna sorry, I have to just plagiarize a lot of like Danny Boyle and stuff, a lot of his director's commentary from the movie that he's done on the Criterion Collection, because it's just really good stuff. But he said they were coming out of a recession. They had just come out of a recession in the UK, and the cinema was exactly what you were just saying, a lot of kind of Merchant Ivory type product, and they were just desperate for something new and different. And these guys just sort of hit the zeitgeist of, okay, here's cool new stuff we can start doing.
Right.
We don't have to tell the same old story. You don't have to have likable characters. So to circle back around to what you were saying of why I like it, I really like that none of these characters are redeemable in any way, shape, or form. They're all assholes in their own right. And it's just refreshing to see that. But in a weird way, you still sort of pick someone to root for. And I guess anyone any individual is going to have who their quote unquote favorite is, but the probably most obvious choice, because he quote unquote gets away with it, or potentially at least knows where the money is, is the Ewan McGregor character, is Alex, and he's the boisterous, loud sort of. I'm not going to say fun-loving one because he's a dick, but he's the most interesting in terms of you'd probably want to have a beer with him just to see what the hell is going to come out of his mouth, character-wise. But still, he's a bad person. Yeah, he is literally, after they find Hugo, the new roommate, dead, he immediately just says, "Wonder how he died," as he's rummaging through the guy's room looking through his stuff. Yeah,
yeah, in fact, he actually says, what is it, Kerry Fox, I think, says, like, we've got a body here or something like that, and he says, "Oh, I've got a story," because he's actually a journalist.
Right. It's not every day I find a story. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's looking at it completely as, "Oh, I now have something to write about at my job." Yeah. So he it benefits him immediately. Right. This unfortunate death.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I found a couple of quotes, because I hated all these people, and I found myself like okay, so full confession, a friend of mine introduced me to this film, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that, and he's really into caper films, and capers, I just don't connect with caper films. Okay. So I was like, all right, well, I didn't really care for it that much then. I'll watch it again. And I was just like, I really don't like these people. And Danny Boyle has I found a quote where he said, when questioned about the criticisms, Danny Boyle responded saying that building plausible characters is something that pleases intellectuals, but audiences in general don't invest as much into the characters in a film. And I thought, like, that seems kind of weird, because, like, if I'm not invested in the character, then, and I don't care what happens to them, then why should I continue to watch that?
Yeah, that's interesting. He of course, said he would say that because he, of course, has made movies with very likable characters, like Slumdog Millionaire, of course. Yeah. All you do is care about that kid. Right. But, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, this is... Okay, let me ask you this. So,
all right,
when they're being interviewed by the police, when the police officer or the inspector rather shows up, probably it's near the end. It's like in the last 20 minutes,
and he's got his assistant.
Yeah, he has his assistant. Yeah. His assistant's actually the writer. That's John Hodge.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, making a cameo appearance.
Oh, all right.
And he starts. He possesses this power of knowledge. You can tell he knows something. Right. And because of that, you feel this impending doom. You're like, oh, they're going to get caught because he's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on here. Yeah. But when he's interviewing, I think he interviews first Juliet, right? And then he interviews Alex separately. Did you ever feel like, oh, shit, they're going to get caught?
I felt tension in the scene, but I didn't care that they were going to get caught or not.
Yeah. So you hate this movie.
I wouldn't go that far. but it really is. It does come down to the characters, I think, because there was for me, there was really nobody there that I could, like, rally behind.
And there's no one redeemable for, I think, a sane person to rally behind. So I agree with you there. I just found it interesting that I was worried about them getting caught in those scenes, even though they all deserve to get caught. Right. But you're kind of like, well, you have no one left to root for. So it's like watching the Super Bowl with two teams you could care less about. And you're sort of just like, well, at least I'll just go for the underdog then. I'd rather see the underdog win. Yeah. And if it's a close match, you actually care if the underdog wins, even though you probably couldn't name one player on the team.
Exactly. No, that's a valid point.
And it could be one of the best games you've ever seen in your life, even though you had no investment at the beginning. Sure. So that might be...
What about, you brought up an interesting point. Ewan McGregor is the one that kind of gets away with it. Yeah. Or at least he knows where the money is. So, do you think, let's imagine into the future, does he go to jail? Does he then become the guys that came and like hit him in the knees with a crowbar.
Yeah, he's probably just a couple years away from being one of those thugs, perhaps. I don't know if he had the chops, though, to be one of those guys, whereas it turned out David had the chops to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, Eccleston's an odd duck.
Yeah.
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 There was some cool stuff with him, though. I liked all the... We kept seeing him, like he pops his head out of the ceiling and looks around, and it's, you know, he's kind of upside down. The whole movie is sort of... We see that shot at the opening...
The twisting,
yeah, the twisting, and it's like his world is upside down, and there's a really great bit too where the camera dolly past a magnifying glass that's on a shelf, and we see his reflection, or you know, his image through them, and again it's upside down, and I was digging a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, there's some really cool camera shots in there. It's what is it? I think Andrew Macdonald, the producer, had said in one of the commentaries that they weren't fooling Film 4, who financed the majority of the film. It cost them £1 million. They shot for £1 million.
Yeah.
So as a filmmaker, you just sort of respect that. You're
right.
Like, well, then 20 years ago, that could be really 3, but still.
but
still, that's a lot.
Yeah.
They built that entire set, that entire flat they built it in a warehouse.
I figured it had to be.
Yeah. And they spent the majority of their budget on that. But he had said they would be looking at dailies and they'd see these really nice, you know, the light coming through all of the holes that David had drilled, you know, there's this light shaft in the attic, and those really nice rotating shots that he did in a couple of instances, and really cool tracking shots along the ceiling, just odd, interesting things that look like an art film. And he said it's a genre film disguised as an art film.
Right.
And so they were really glad to see the violence, because they're like, oh, we can sell the movie, but they were worried that, you know, they didn't want it to be a straight up horror.
Sure.
They didn't want it to be like a total, you know, C movie.
Right.
But I think encapsulating it as a genre film disguised as an art film is a pretty accurate description.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's a very good description of it, I think.
Yeah.
So does this movie have any influence on, there's the isolated location, but as far as time lapse, was this sort of an inspiration for you guys, or?
Yeah, a lot. Putting those 3 characters, you know, having 3 characters creates, I don't know how much I should give away as far as time lapse goes.
No, don't give anything away.
It gives a really good dynamic when you have 2 guys and a girl. There's a lot of relationship things that you can play with that dynamic. Even though no one was truly coupling in Shallow Grave, Juliet, the Kerry Fox character, is kind of playing both sides a little bit.
Yeah.
I think her favorite was probably Alex, but she had to play David at the end.
The other guy was crazy and lived in an attic.
Yeah.
Unless you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I feel we had a lot of inspiration from that sort of 3 people living in a flat, living in an apartment dynamic, and also one of the 3 slowly disintegrating psychologically. Okay. And because of what's happening externally, the external forces are causing it. It's not just ascending into madness on its own accord, but it's related to the plot. Right. And that we definitely had some inspiration from, and they, you know, they actually said their inspiration. A lot of their inspiration in the script writing was Blood Simple. Oh.
Well, that's funny because the holes in the ceiling completely reminded me of the ending of Blood Simple, and I was actually trying to figure out, like, wait, which came first?
The sawing was from Goodfellas. Danny Boyle, he straight up says, that's my Goodfellas ripoff. Yeah. There's 2 shots of them in the woods sawing, and also, what was it? John Hodge mentioned Diabolique.
Sawing and time lapse.
I'm sorry?
Do you have any sawing and time lapse?
Sawing?
Yeah.
No sawing. Okay. No sawing. All right. But there is a scene, this isn't giving anything away, but David starts putting locks. He puts a lock on the hatch that goes into the attic where he hid the money. Yeah. And one of our characters starts adding locks to the door, just sort of like a paranoia thing where you, you know, we got to start protecting your domain or something. But it's normal people put locks on their doors, but you can tell when it's a crazy person putting a lock on.
Well, okay,
I don't know. You can
what's the difference?
Well, when you're doing it under duress, you know, when you're obviously just, you could just tell the character's not all there. There's not, it's not just a Sunday afternoon chore.
It's not just a lock.
It's all of a sudden, the lock thing reminds me of a really cool scene that I like in the movie that stands out, and that's when the bad guys finally catch up with them and they bust into the apartment. Yeah. And, you know, they take down Alex and Juliet. And David's in the attic. He can overhear all of this happening, the commotion downstairs. So you see this hand reach underneath the hatch where he had the lock, and he puts the key in there. And which is an interesting shot, because I can't think of any other movie where locks are meant to keep people out of something, right? Yeah. And I can't think of another movie where a protagonist gives the antagonist complete access to get to them.
Yeah, I was wondering what was going on there.
Yeah, but you know, you think through it. If he didn't put it there, he might kill his friends. So where's the key? And they'll be like, we don't have the key. Yeah. You know, our friend has a key. Then the element of surprise is gone. So it was just a really clever way of giving them access so he could ambush them.
No, I thought... Don't get me wrong. I thought there was some really cool stuff in it. It was just, like, I really found myself... I was like... Yeah, I couldn't find somebody to get behind.
Screw all these people.
Kinda, yeah.
Well, you were behind the cops then, so you wanted the cops to win.
Kinda, yeah.
So maybe you wanted the inspector to win.
No. Maybe.
Yeah, he comes in too late.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned the inspector, because I was convinced, and I couldn't remember how the film ended, but I was convinced he was also one of the thugs. I was like,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because, you know, once you get into that, like, caper thing, there's always an extra beat.
Oh, yeah, another layer.
I was like, because he seemed to know a lot. And I don't think he ever showed ID.
No, you know what? You're right. And
he just announces himself at the door. He's like, oh, I'm the inspector. Yeah, and there's an interesting, again, to rip off the commentary, there's an interesting note from Andrew Macdonald that said, you know, you could argue that that the inspector and the assistant inspector, whatever you call them, don't actually exist. That they're just a figment of their imagination and their fear. Because you never see them interacting with any other people, and you see the cop inside. You know, when Alex gets called out to the woods because they uncover the criminal bodies surfacing. The inspector's there looking at him. The assistant inspector's looking at him from the woods, and then inside you see him looking, but they're not interacting with anyone. Even at the end where he comes up and he's stabbed, he just says, you know, hello, inspector, or whatever. Which I read was a line they added in post. Because everybody thought he was dead, which I thought was really strange.
Yeah, I thought that's strange too.
Just like lying there and blinking and looking around. It's like, all right.
I think they thought he died, and that's him in his like his altered state. Like he's actually dead. He's But I never thought that, even without that line. Because you're right. That line comes from a shot looking at his head up at the inspector, so you never see his face. And I had to, I rewatched the movie a few times for this to refresh my memory on it, and you could have bet me $1,000 and I would have said, oh no, you're looking right at him when he says it, because in my head that's the power of suggestion. That's how I remember it. Was he's there, knifing him, bleeding, smiling, this chest side.
That's funny. I actually, when I heard him say it, I thought, oh, that was done afterwards.
Yeah, well, but you watch it, you can tell.
But it was funny. I didn't realize why they had done it afterwards, and then I read, and it was like, oh, they did it just so people would understand that he's not dead. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. I didn't think that for a minute that he wasn't dead. So, anyway.
Yeah. Well, you could debate. He could die later. He could just die of blood loss.
He could.
There's no there's no medical. There's all this room full of people, but there's no medical personnel attending to him.
Like the photographer is like literally in his face snapping photos.
They're just letting him bleed out.
Yeah,
there on There's a funny story about the movie that I mentioned to Bradley from having watched the commentary on it that I think shows just how people have different recollections of what happens on a film set, especially from a director or someone on the production side.
Yeah.
And Danny Boyle's commentary was when the money shows up, he said we hired a service that brings £1 million to you with a security guard.
What?
And you get to like rent it for the day. £1 million in actual cash.
Yeah.
And they were like, yes, and so that way their expressions were real because they're really looking at $1 million of actual money. And then you listen to the producer and writer commentary, and Andrew Macdonald was like, yeah, Danny wanted us to look into this renting thing, and we did, but we couldn't get it. So we ended up having to just photocopy actual money, which is illegal, but we did it anyway.
Right.
We color photocopied it, cut it out, and then put real bills on top, but that's what it was.
Oh, that's so funny.
You wonder what actually happened. I would probably just assume Danny Boyle was way too busy. He probably just assumed that the rental thing worked out.
Yeah.
But I'm sure Bradley and I have a million stories about time lapse where, that would differ like that. Like, no, it happened this way. No, it happened that way. And all that matters is the money was there. It looked real.
Yeah.
You shot the scene.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. I wonder how many more of those instances that there are in, this movie or any other movie. But
I think that happens on everything. I talked to a guy recently, and it was like, oh yeah, I finally got a copy of that movie, and he was like, oh, that was a great shoot. And I was like, you're the only person I know who has said that was a great shoot.
Right.
Like, yeah.
What position did he have on the
He was a sound.
Oh, okay.
Sound guy. Yeah.
All right.
So
even from listening to the chaos, he still found his zen state of being.
So,
how about that?
All right, man. Well, it was great talking with you. And where can people? Do you tweet? Do you?
I try to. Just recently, I had an account for 4 years, and I think my first tweet went out like 2 months ago.
Nice. What was it?
I don't remember.
All right.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
BP Cooper is my Twitter handle. And also the time-lapse website is timelapse-themovie.com.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. We'll put that on
Follow
the website.
me, friend me, find me on Facebook, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And Time-Lapse, once again, screens Saturday, May 31st at 8:30 p.m. and the following day, Sunday, June 1st at 11:30 a.m. here at the Uptown Cinema during Seattle's International Film Festival. You can buy tickets at the box office or do yourself a favor, get your tickets online by visiting sif.net. And that's it. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to start thinking about the past.